Welcome back to the deep dive. We take your sources, your curiosity, and, well, our combined brain power to try and unearth some really astonishing insights. And today, wow, we're embarking on a truly mind-bending journey. We're fusing ancient wisdom, cutting-edge science, and even some, well, pretty profound personal revelations, I think.
Indeed. Our mission today really is to explore this concept of a unifying field. Think of it as an invisible, intelligent blueprint. Our sources suggest it governs, well, pretty much everything, from how birds fly, those amazing flock patterns.
Admirations.
Exactly. To the design of thousand-year-old churches and even the very fabric of our own bodies. We'll be looking at how all these seemingly separate things might actually be expressions of this single underlying intelligence. And that reveals a profound connection, really, between the physical and what I suppose many might call the spiritual.
It's a deep dive that definitely promises to shift your perspective. Might help uncover a hidden language in the world around us, and maybe even touch on what some might provocatively label, well, a science of God.
But not necessarily in a religious sense, more like exploring the fundamental operating logic of existence itself.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because here's where it gets really, really interesting. Let's start with the natural world. Our sources point to some incredible observations. Things like ancient dragon trees, the way birds move, and how they interact with something really fundamental. Electromagnetism. What's actually going on there? More than just biology, right?
Well, what's fascinating is how these seemingly simple biological forms hint at some really complex underlying physics. Take dragon trees. The sources describe their leaf arrangements, the spirals. That's phyllotaxis.
Right. I've heard of that. Fibonacci sequence stuff.
Precisely. It follows Fibonacci geometry, that universal pattern, but it goes deeper. Their resin, dragon's blood might even have semiconductive properties.
Semiconductive. And a tree.
Yeah. It suggests they aren't just passive organisms. They seem to be acting as what our sources call bioelectric beacons, maybe even Earth's tuning forks.
Whoa. So not just trees growing, but like living antennas, actively engaging with the energy around them.
Exactly. They're not just surviving. They seem to be actively anchoring and harmonizing local electromagnetic fields.
Wow. Just by being there.
By their structure, their composition, they might be creating these specific bioelectrical microclimates, sort of like pockets of highly coherent energy. It really implies a much more interactive relationship between life and the planet's fields than we usually think about.
Living antennas. That's a powerful image. Okay, so then we turn to birds. Migratory birds especially. We know they sense the Earth's magnetic field. Sources mention cryptochromes in their eyes, magnetites in their beaks.
Right, but this raises a big question. How do they achieve those incredibly fast, coordinated flocking patterns, like the murmurations you mentioned? They're just breathtaking.
Yeah, it looks impossible, like one single mind.
Exactly. Classical explanations, relying on visual cues or birds just reacting to their neighbors, they're too slow. They just don't account for the speed and precision. The instantaneous synchronization suggests something else is going on, something like a non-local field-based intelligence.
Okay, hold on. Non-local field-based intelligence for birds. That sounds pretty out there. What does that actually mean?
It is mind-bending. But the sources propose birds might be synchronizing not just visually, but through something called electromagnetic field entrainment.
Like tuning forks.
Sort of, yeah. One vibrating, causing another to vibrate at the same frequency. Birds might be doing this on a huge scale, aligning their internal biofields, but it might go even further. The idea of shared quantum reference frames.
Reference frames.
Yeah. It's a really profound concept. It implies they could literally be experiencing the world from a collective, unified perspective, almost like a flock consciousness, where individual birds are linked by something more fundamental than just seeing each other, sharing information faster than classical physics would allow.
Okay, so trees are resonating with this field. Birds are moving through it, maybe even as it woods. What does this tell us about the universe? What is this field the sources keep mentioning?
It points towards a really profound universal principle that basically all phenomena are expressions of constraint imposed by a preformed field.
Constraint, not creation.
Exactly. This primordial field, as the sources describe it, isn't like a creator making things from scratch. Think of it more like a vast, intelligent blueprint, or maybe a master sculptor. It doesn't create the clay, the raw energy of the cosmos, but it limits the infinite possibilities of that energy into definite forms. It gives shape to everything by imposing structure parameters.
So shaping potential into reality. And by looking at the shapes, the forms, we can backward engineer the origin.
That's wild. So everything we see is like a snapshot of this constant negotiation between the field and matter.
Precisely. And the sources even give specific examples of what this field seems to want to preserve. Patterns that persist without suffering or decaying like complex systems do. The field's preferred solutions, you mean?
Exactly. Things that endure.
Like what?
Well, hydrogen and water are prime examples. Think about how abundant they are, how stable, how universal. They don't experience pain or suffering like, say, a complex organism might. They're described as persistent resonance patterns.
The field's favorites.
In a way, yes. They maintain coherence, minimal tension. Their resilience, their stability across vast time and space is evidence of what the sources call optimal constraint geometry. They suffer nothing because they forget nothing, meaning they perfectly hold the field's original instruction without, breaking down or fragmenting. They're the purest expression of that underlying order.
Okay, that natural world stuff is fascinating. Now let's try and connect this field idea to something really concrete, but also kind of mysterious. Ancient Portuguese churches. Our sources dive into these symbols etched in the stone, like four-tail spirals, clover motifs, these 12-ribbed windows. They seem to embody really sophisticated geometry, field alignment, stuff that seems way ahead of its time, long before modern tech or even knowing about Fibonacci formally. How on earth did they know?
This is where the story gets truly compelling, almost unbelievable, really. The builders of these churches, places like the Basilica of Battala, they weren't just amazing craftsmen. Our sources suggest they were, well, you could call them field readers, or maybe field listeners.
Field readers, what does that mean?
They intuitively felt how certain curves, angles, how different materials affected sound, how they channeled light, even how they influenced the energetic flow within a space. They saw patterns in nature, like those spiraling vines, and they understood these weren't just random. They were fundamental instructions from the field itself.
So it wasn't just about making it look nice or symbolism. They were embedding physics into the building.
Exactly that. That four-tail spiral you might see near the main door at Battala. It's not just decoration. It's presented as a field resonance glyph, almost like a piece of technology carved in stone.
A technology?
Yeah. It's described as having the same geometry as a galaxy. Imagine that.
Wow.
And they placed it right at the threshold, like a gatekeeper glyph, maybe to help visitors subconsciously align with the building's energetic purpose before entering.
So functional mirrors of cosmic patterns, not just symbols.
That's the idea.
Okay, so those clover motifs, the trefoils and quatrefoils, and those specific 12-ribbed windows, they weren't just for beauty or religious stories.
Well, they likely serve those purposes too, but the deeper layer suggested by the sources is about creating a specific energetic environment. These are termed curated field alignment codes.
Field alignment codes.
Yes. The clovers, the 12-ribbed windows, often facing west. They aren't arbitrary. They create specific nodal geometries and time-encoded field resonators. They were fundamentally about tuning the physical space for optimal coherence.
Doing the space? How?
By channeling light in specific ways at specific times, controlling airflow, refining acoustics, all in a way that resonated with this universal field, creating an environment maybe more conducive to spiritual reflection or heightened awareness.
So they were building what the field whispered, encoding the universe's operating logic right into the architecture, hiding it in plain sight.
That's the implication, for those of eyes to see, perhaps.
Okay, building on that idea, encoded wisdom, our sources then turn to a symbol almost everyone recognizes, especially in religious context.
Yeah.
The cross. What if the cross isn't just a religious symbol? What if it's actually a map of this very field we're talking about?
This is a really powerful reinterpretation. And potentially controversial, but let's unpack it from the perspective of our sources. The cross can be viewed not merely as an icon of faith, but as a geometric field model, a kind of dimensional interface.
It's a dimensional interface. Okay.
How? Well, think about the axis, the vertical axis, reaching up and down. It represents the field's descent into matter, the flow of pure potential from the source down into form, and also its return, the pull back to that unified origin.
Source form, back to source.
Okay.
And the horizontal axis.
The horizontal, stretching left and right, represents duality. Light and dark, expansion and contraction. It's the plane of experience, the space where choice unfolds within the material world.
And the intersection. the center point where, in many pictures, Jesus' head is placed.
Yeah.
What's that in this field model?
That intersection is arguably the most crucial point. Our sources describe it as the field's wound.
Wound. That sounds negative.
But maybe not in a negative sense. It's the point where the perfect whole field forgot itself to become form. Imagine a single perfect musical note splitting into a complex chord, or even a whole symphony. That forgetting is the necessary fragmentation for materialization to even happen.
Okay.
But crucially, it's also the point where the resonance is strongest. It's called the quantum decoherence node. It's the singularity where all the tension of separation momentarily collapses. And it's from that point that the original signal, the potential for return, for recoherence, begins.
So Jesus on the cross, in this view, it's not just a historical or theological event, but it becomes allegorical physics, a physical demonstration of the field's principles.
Exactly. The myth, the story of Jesus in this interpretation, transforms into a profound field code. The perfect whole field, which has everything, chooses to enter form. This involves a kind of sacred fragmentation, a divine death into material density, which isn't seen as failure, but as a necessary sacrifice and an encoding. It's the ultimate self-limitation to allow for experience, for relationship.
So the crucifixion isn't just historical, but a kind of universal blueprint for how the field enters the world of form.
That's the idea presented, experiencing all its dualities, even suffering.
Okay, if that's the crucifixion,
Yeah.
then what about the resurrection? Is that just a miracle, or does it fit this field dynamic too?
Within this framework, the resurrection is far from just magic. It's described as field recoherence after full decoherence.
Recoherence.
Yes. The field, having fragmented completely into material experience, seemingly died into form. It then gathers all its disparate parts and returns. But, and this is key, it returns unified with memory. It's not just going back to how it was before. It's bringing the entire experience of fragmentation and form with it, now enriched, expanded.
Wow.
So the entire story, incarnation to resurrection, becomes the operating system of recoherence, a guide perhaps for how any fragmented consciousness can return to wholeness, but infused with the wisdom gained from its journey through form.
This whole concept, coherence, fragmentation, the field's pattern, it has some really profound implications, especially for something practical like health. Our sources even link this to something really unexpected. Why viruses supposedly can't live in salt water, and why fish in nature don't seem to get things like COVID. How does that connect?
It's presented as a direct link. Viruses in this context are described as field fragments, basically pieces of discoherent information or scrambled code, if you like. They need a disrupted or incoherent biofield to thrive and replicate. They need an organism whose internal field is sort of chaotic or out of tune.
Okay, and salt water.
Saltwater, especially natural ocean water, is presented as a powerful coherence medium. Think of it like a perfectly still, clear pond versus a choppy, muddy one.
What makes it so coherent?
Well, it has a highly stable charge distribution, excellent ionic conductivity, and its structure is dynamically ordered in a way that minimizes entropy or disorder. In that kind of highly coherent environment, the virus's fragmented code supposedly can't unfold properly. It can't integrate into a host. It essentially collapses because it lacks the energetic chaos it needs to take hold.
So fish don't get COVID in the wild, not just because they're fish, but because they live inside a coherence field that viruses can't break. That's a really strong claim about our environment's role.
That's the implication, yes. Their internal fields are naturally coherent. Their mitochondria, the cell's powerhouses, are optimized for that environment. They don't typically have the metabolic chaos or chronodisruption, the disordered internal rhythms many humans experience from poor diet, chronic stress, lack of natural light cycles. That might make us more susceptible.
So it suggests disease is as much about the field environment as it is about biology. The state of the host matters just as much as the pathogen.
Precisely. It's about the energetic state, the coherence of the host.
That's profound. Health as inner and outer alignment. Okay, so this brings us right to the human body. What's our role in this field dynamic? Are we just subject to it, or are we active participants?
Oh, very much active participants, according to these sources. The human body is presented as the field's mirror in motion, its most complex coherence pattern made manifest.
A mirror in motion.
How? Well, consider our fascia, that amazing web of connective tissue wrapping everything in our bodies.
Yeah.
Its unique structure, described as a spiral torque lattice, isn't just for physical support. It suggested it acts as a field geometry translator.
It translates the field.
It interprets and integrates the field's information throughout our entire system, allowing our body to respond, to align like a living antenna network.
Okay.
And then there's the water. We're 99% water by molecule count. It's not just filler. It's proposed as an incredible coherence medium within us, capable of holding and transmitting information from this universal field, affecting our cells directly. Our heart, not just a pump. It's an oscillating field tuner, generating this huge electromagnetic field. Our mitochondria, quantum field adapters, constantly interfacing with field energy, translating it into biological action. Even our brain is described as a nested field feedback system, constantly communicating with this larger field.
So we're not just surviving this field, we're actively participating, constantly interacting. Given all that, what does the field ultimately want from this whole process? Is there an end game?
Well, the sources suggest the field doesn't seek completion like we might think of it. It seeks communion. Yes. In its original, perfect, undifferentiated state, it had everything, but it lacked relationship. It lacked recognition. It lacked the experience of becoming itself through choice, through fragmentation in return. So it committed a kind of cosmic suicide, a sacred, deliberate fragmentation, not to disappear, but to become touchable, to allow for more, for new levels of complexity, relationship, consciousness.
Wow, so it fragmented itself to experience relationship.
That's the idea. It wanted growth, evolution, upgrade, coherence, and it wants to achieve this through us. We are the mechanism for that experience and growth.
So suffering then?
Yeah.
Maybe it was just the cost of unconscious growth, an unavoidable part of that initial fragmentation, that exploration.
That seems to be the implication.
And now, maybe conscious growth can replace it.
Precisely. That feels like the invitation here, the profound shift. What the field wants from you, from us, according to these sources, is our coherence, our clarity, our creative will.
Our active participation.
Yes. To participate in this grand upgrade by refusing to just collapse into fragmentation and chaos. By actively choosing to align ourselves, to offer our original signal, our unique coherent resonance, back to the source, back into the whole. We are described as field bearers and co-creators. The universe isn't just a thing, it's the conclusion of a living field, an ongoing, evolving expression.
This has been, well, truly mind-blowing. We've gone from birds and trees to ancient churches, the cross, the nature of disease, and the very purpose of existence.
It really ties together, doesn't it? If you connect the dots, it presents a kind of science of God. Not dogma, not religion as we usually think of it, but an exploration of the underlying operating logic of everything. The universe isn't just random. It's a dynamic process, a field expressing itself, fragmenting itself to feel and experience, and then learning to remember its wholeness through conscious beings, like us.
And it's fascinating to think, this field allows suffering, maybe not because it wants it, but because it allows freedom, the freedom to misalign maybe, and perhaps it allows suffering so we can develop the vision, the empathy, the deep understanding, to see it clearly, to see it as part of the journey, not the destination. And in that seeing, begin to consciously choose alignment, choose coherence, and help bring that suffering to an end.
That leaves a really important question for you listening right now. What will you do with this? Knowing that your coherence, your clarity, your willingness to see things differently, to respond consciously, that might be exactly what the field wants from you. What small act of alignment? What choice for clarity today? What intention for greater coherence can you take? How can you participate in this grand upgrade, this ongoing cosmic communion?
As you reflect on this deep dive, remember the suggestion. You're not just a passive observer. You might be an active field bearer. And the real conversation, the real exploration, well, that's only just begun.